Good morning. We're just waiting for our second panelist from Ontario. And we're going to give her a couple more minutes and before we start. Jessica, please let me know if she
I'm
joins.
Here.
You're here? Oh, wonderful.
Somehow I had your name, Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, alrighty. So perfect. Thank you so much, especially to our special guest, Rachael King from Ontario and Nicole Thiessen from Rostern. So just a few housekeeping notes before we begin. I think I know everybody online here, but for those I haven't met, my name is Verona Thibault, and I'm the CEO of the Saskatchewan Economic Development Alliance. And this is our third webinar in our series Road to Summit 2023 in advance of our Provincial Economic Development Summit in October. So I just wanted to do a brief plug this morning. We have opened a virtual registration option today for the summit for those folks who can't travel in. So please check that out. Also, we're doing some fine tuning on our speakers and our agenda, and we hope to have some new sessions confirmed by the end of August. So you can visit saskleaders.com for more information. So this morning we'll ask our audience to stay muted until it's time for Q&A. And I have Trustee Jessica from Métis Roots Outsourcing, who's been managing the webinar series. She'll manage the Q&A this morning for us. And we are recording this webinar, and it will be on the SEDA YouTube channel, as well as posted on our website under the webinars page. So a brief introduction on our guests. First of all, Rachael King is the General Manager with the Blyth Center for the Arts. Rachel's a graduate of the University of Windsor and the University of Iowa, and she's worked across North America as a stage production and tour manager, which sounds very, very exciting. Rachael co-leads the Blyth organization currently, and she's responsible for the admin, financial, human resources, logistics of the almost 50-year-old company. I'm really interested. Both of our guests are managing rural cultural organizations that have been in place for many, many years. And Blyth is only a population of about 1,000, I believe. And Rostern, again, maybe 1,500. So this is, this is a good example for rural Saskatchewan. So I'll let Rachael maybe talk a bit more about her organization as we proceed. We also have Nicole Thiessen. Nicole is the program director for the Station Arts Center in Rostern, Saskatchewan. She's been with the Arts Center for 10 years. And Nicole has a background in the arts, including a painting degree from the Alberta College of Art and Design. And she's worked with for a number of years in public programs with the Glenbow Museum. She's organized arts festivals in Calgary. And in 2011, Nicole returned to Saskatchewan, thank you, Nicole, with her family to settle in Rostern, where she grew up. The Station Arts Center has been a part of the Thiessen family since the 80s, when her mother and a group of community members started it. So great to have both of you with us. We really appreciate your time. So, as I mentioned earlier, I'm really captivated by the dynamic that both of your communities are typical of Saskatchewan rural communities. We have our urban communities, which I like to call rural urban. Most of our urban communities here are under 2,000 population. So Rachael, do you feel that, can you talk a bit more about your organization and how the arts and activities have really helped that identity of your community, the heritage, preserve and activate that culture?
Sure, absolutely. I will first offer up that the DNA statement that the community and the BIA came up with a few years ago is welcoming the stories or welcome to the stories of rural life for the community as a whole. Which 100% comes out of their connection to Blyth Festival and the theater. So ultimately, the organization that it is today, we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And it all started way back in the early 1970s. A bunch of hippies from Toronto came out to live in a decrepit farmhouse that probably didn't even have running water. with the goal of offering themselves up to go live and work on farms, learn from those people and those residents, and then bring their experiences and stories back into a rehearsal hall, and try to reenact them and find a way to make a bigger picture story out of it. And through that, they created certainly, forged relationships and started that bond of trust with the community and weirdo artists, as it were, at the time. And their work then went on to become what is called the farm show, which originally was performed in auction barns. It came to where the people were. And they then came to see it, and it reflected their lives back to them. They were seeing their experience or quite possibly their actual neighbor being performed on stage. And that those bonds, that relationship, those artists' immersion into the community planted the seeds that then 2 years later, some brave folks formed the Blyth Festival and started. We've always had the mission of giving voice to the region and the country. So focusing on Canadian stories and certainly rural stories, but also just universal things that certain our audiences are not just made up of farmers. Our plays don't always just have farmers. There are themes in humanity that cross the rural and urban divide. So they laid that ground and that relationship and trust and faith with the community that we're interested in your stories. We may want to amplify them, we want to honor them, and we will do it right. Has been a long journey of doing that, which has certainly forged a lot of bonds.
So do you
Not
feel
sure if I answered the question.
Well, no, that's beautifully you did. You that's really, a lovely mission, and you're on point with that mission currently. Has the participation, then your attendance, built over the years, and does the audience come largely from outside the community?
So absolutely, our numbers continue to grow, with the caveat that, of course, COVID in Ontario has had a significant impact. So we are not quite yet on the trajectory that we were at the end of 2019. We do have a good portion of local audience, but so in a summer season, which is our primary theater season, in 2019, I believe we saw just shy of 30,000 folks attend over the course of the summer. And probably about 2/3 of those would be considered tourists by Ontario tourist standards, which is 40 kilometers in a rural area. Of course, as you know, that doesn't take a whole lot. So we certainly, the place has grown in such a way that we definitely have attendance from usually about 8 different provinces, anywhere between 15 and 23 different states, and usually 2 international countries a year. And some of that, certainly long-standing relationships, it becomes a habit, it becomes a trend, a thing that you just do, a tradition. But also we are approximately 20 minutes from Lake Huron, where there's a whole tourist and cottage industry. So we are also part of that sort of ecosystem as well.
What about accommodations then? Are folks staying outside the community or in? How, can you talk about that a bit?
Certainly, ongoing struggle. And not only for our patrons, but Blyth Festival itself, there are 3 of our 50 some odd artists actually live in Blyth. The rest of them we bring from away. So one of the things I have to do every year is find housing inventory for these people and then pay for it. But from a patron perspective, within the community, there have been some growing sort of small boutique hotels and a little bit of Airbnb action. We do have a sizable municipal campground at Blyth where we just built an outdoor second venue in the last 2 years. And so our contribution to populating that campground has also been increasing the last couple of years as our audiences realize they can come and camp and then just walk over and see the play. And then there are sort of larger, more standard motels and hotels within a 20 to 45-minute radius.
Right.
But yes, it's an ongoing struggle for patrons who want to, because they often come and they will see 3 or 4 things in a number of days with us.
Right. Okay. All righty. So Nicole, can we talk about the impact that the Station Arts has had on Rostron? Maybe talk a bit about the history as well. We learn a bit more about your mission.
Yeah, so in 1989, this was sort of a real in-town project. So this train station had been sitting empty for years, and my mother, along with a group of really dedicated arts enthusiasts, they made up a proposal to turn it into an arts center. And it took a lot of kind of convincing at the time, but Rostron as a community has a strong music background. And there were several artists in town at the time that were really behind the idea. So it was a real community-based effort. And eventually they were able to get funding to renovate the train station, and they partnered with the town of Rostron. So basically the town leases the building to us. So we were very lucky to have a venue. A lot of arts councils in Saskatchewan have to rely on holding their activities in school gyms or churches and things like that. So that was a huge hurdle, and we're a nonprofit charitable organization, and we're a cooperative. So these were all things that happened kind of at the start to keep the ownership sort of within the community, and everyone pitched in to help with the renovations, to help with the fundraising. There was an unbelievable amount of like bake sales and concerts that were being held. So they were an arts council before they had the building. And so they were holding concerts at school gyms and things like that to get things going. And then once the building was ready, they were able to have their first play here. And it was a real big hit. And over the years, it grew and grew. Now, I should say it has evolved. The station has been around for about 30 years. And so it's evolved over time. I think what put Rostron as a community on the map was the play that we would have every summer. We had one giant play. And just like Rachel was saying, it's a huge challenge because we would always bring in artists from outside. And then, you have to find places for them to live. And so it was a very big project, and we continued that up until COVID. And then we did have to take a step back and refocus a little bit. So sort of where we've gone since then is we haven't been doing our summer plays, but we're not just performing arts theater. So we have a lot of concerts. We have touring shows with artists that come from across Canada. We have about 7 of those concerts a year. Then we also book local artists in our theater for larger concerts. We also have what we call a live and local stage in our gallery for more cabaret type settings. Those are smaller events. So we have, 2 concerts a month, sort of in that area. And then we also have a rotating professional art gallery. So that changes out every month or 2. And those are also artists from, I guess, across Saskatchewan. So, moving forward, we're exploring different ways to get back into theater because it's really missed in the area. But I don't know that it'll take on the same top heavy, like this is our one summer production. We've moved more to a year-round programming model. And we want to be able to serve our community and area year-round, as well as visitors that come from elsewhere. So we don't have that massive influx, like we might have experienced in the past, but it's really positive. It's been very good in terms of smaller events that are very meaningful. And I think it's super exciting to have new perspectives and ideas that come into our community via the arts that kind of inspire new ideas elsewhere. It has this ripple effect, and it keeps us from getting stagnant in our own ideas or perspectives, or anything like that. So it's been very healthy for our community over the years, and the businesses seem to recognize that. They tell us all the time.
So you have a healthy engagement, I can imagine, from your local community and regional community. Is there a steady attendance or engagement from the broader area, or folks driving in and out or staying overnight?
Yes, so definitely driving in and out. We have, with our concert series, probably at least half of our season ticket subscribers are from Saskatoon and Prince Albert. So that's about 75 kilometers away. We sort of serve a radius of 75 kilometers. So definitely a lot of city people, they'll even see a show in the city and then come see it again at our theater because of the more intimate experience that we offer. Also, we've had really large community choirs over the years that were made up of largely Prince Albert, Saskatoon, and our surrounding area. Sometimes it was as large as 80 people. So that was a real cool urban-rural, collaboration. And then we also have partnered with Tourism Saskatoon in order to offer things for day trippers, because they were saying, in Saskatchewan, there's the city stuff, but a lot of tourists want to explore what's just outside the city. So we did a huge mentorship program with them, came up with kind of an outdoor program that was perfectly suited to people who just want a day trip, an escape somewhere else. They come and do a program in our garden. And that's been very positive, I think, on both ends, because they've done a lot of marketing for us, with their larger capability. But it's been wonderful to have guests visiting in the summertime doing that program.
Yeah, I like the example you've highlighted on the rural-urban collaboration, because that's something that we wanted to highlight, that option here in Saskatchewan. I just want to zero in about, with you, first of all, Nicole, and then Rachel, the funding, not the funding model, the business model for the organization. So I had forgotten that you're a cooperative. Can you talk a bit about your funding, how you self-generate, and how does the co-op model work? Who are members?
Yeah, so we have a list of lifetime members, which would be, maybe we have about 250, somewhere like that. And they chose to go with a cooperative model at the start just because they wanted that community buy-in, and they wanted the community to feel that sense of pride and ownership over what was going on here. And that spirit has really continued over the years. We've, some years we'll have over 100 volunteers doing different jobs. So it's been wonderful that way to kind of activate people, to have people really believe in what's happening. We also like to invite the community to participate in community art projects and things like that. So that's a very important part of our recipe, and what we can do. And, you can see the ownership that people take. Businesses like to bring clients here for lunch. We have people that have family celebrations here all the time. They like to show it off to guests. And so I forget a little bit. We were talking about the cooperative model, and we wanted also our other funding.
Yes, right. Obviously, you're self-generating revenue. You've got your various streams. You're receiving some money from perhaps lottery revenue.
Yes, yeah. So Sask Culture and Sask Lotteries, that's an important part of this puzzle. And it in Saskatchewan, that is a really predictable stream of funding, which I think is rare to have. So we're very lucky to have that in this province. We get funding. So that's we get provincial funding, and then we also get Heritage Canada funding. Sask Arts, which is tied in with other funding bases as well. The Organization of Saskatchewan Arts Councils is a massive resource for us as well, and we get some funding through them. And then, of course, we have sponsorships and donations.
Okay, super. Thanks, Nicole. Rachel, I'm going to circle back to you. Can you talk a bit more about your business model?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we may have lost you.
Different streams of revenue. We are fortunate to be multi-year operating clients. My internet is not great. We're multi-year operating clients for the Canada Council for the Arts as well as the Ontario Arts Council. So, I mean, that's always tenuous with government funding, but we apply for that quite regularly. So that is a foundation of what and then we often usually are applying for whatever project grants through public funding that might fit what we're up to as well. Box office revenues, and then the other large primary source is individual and corporate donations. Certainly throughout the pandemic, we have learned more and more about what the organization and the work that we do means to the community, and they have definitely stepped up, and the community at home and away has stepped up to help us keep going. There is sort of some smaller pieces in there as well. We do have a long-term lease on the indoor theater building that is actually it's a living cenotaph, in fact. Yeah, it's a living cenotaph built by the community over 100 years ago, and to honor the boys who went to war, instead of making a statue that you would walk by. And it's in fact a municipal building that we have a long-term lease on. So as staffing capabilities allow, we can certainly open up that building for rentals for some revenue there. And then we also have a volunteer art gallery, orchestra, and choir that are under the umbrella of the Center for the Arts, and they all have their, ultimately at the year end, all of their financials fall into our books as well.
Okay, I love this living cenotaph.
Cenotaph, yeah.
Cenotaph. I have some friends in the living heritage sector who would love to hear about that. So I'm going to pass that on. Now, broadband was on our list of items to talk about, so it seems like a timely segue. When we're talking with rural organizations, it's key. Right? Have you found that there's been challenges in implementation, or has connectivity, is it stable? Has it impacted your operations and your programming?
I'll go first, if that's okay. Our programming generally is in person and face to face. So from a digital perspective, we haven't gone too far down that path. We do have young company members who have actually been doing some virtual reality work, but they do that from their home locations. As you have just experienced, I mean, I am home alone and there are no other devices that are eating anything from my internet. And I live in a town and it's not entirely reliable. And certainly as we have, you know, like 78 people working in our buildings right now, and as they're all trying to use the internet, you know, our phones will never go to voice over internet protocol phones, because I have no confidence that they would actually function and we could do the rest of the work we need to do.
Okay. But you mentioned virtual reality. How does that function to factor into your programming?
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, there you are. Yes, so we have a young company which historically is kids anywhere between sort of 12 and 19. have a 6-week intensive in the summer where they would come together and they would create, they would gain skills and interact with professional artists and then create some form of theatrical work together. As we hit the pandemic and had to try to figure out how to still engage with youth and how to also be beneficial to their lives at a time that was really challenging. We were able to bring them together as a young company in virtual reality. We had a sponsor that helped to pay for getting them all virtual reality headsets. And then we engaged with a couple of theater folk who are also well skilled in virtual reality and building worlds, who then mentored these youth through creating a space and designing things and engaging with and creating work in virtual reality together, but from their living rooms, an 1.5-hour drive apart, and bringing together a community of teens at a time where they were quite isolated because of the pandemic and online school and not being able to do the things and commune together like they used to be able to.
Right. Okay. Well, before we pass it on to Nicole, since we're talking about youth, is there any other, and I love this virtual reality programming, is there any other youth engagement in terms of programs that you have?
Absolutely. So right now, as I speak, we do have an in-person young company piece happening right now. There are 10 teens from within a probably 2-hour radius that are coming into Blyth for the next 2 weeks to engage with all kinds of the professionals that we've got working with us who volunteered to do a fight workshop, do a clown workshop, let's do some poetry, let's read a play and then talk to the playwright. So they're working together right now. And then we've just hired a full-time year-round director of education who started in February, who's building out some programming there. And we this past year hosted the National Theatre School Drama Festival in our indoor venue in March. And so we are, now that we have some dedicated staff, also looking at how we can support those schools in bringing those pieces to life, but further out from the actual festival to help them. It's not always a drama teacher that's trying to direct or supervise the play. Sometimes it's the accounting teacher. So, how can we help all of those people to have success? There is also the art gallery itself has been doing some curation nights. Once a month, they've been, or critique nights, having artists volunteer to bring their work and communing together to look at what's been done and provide some critique and some mentorship there. So
Super.
Those are the big, and then certainly there are, generally speaking, through our staff, there are different tiers of skill levels and staff, and so we often are looking out into the community we need a teenager who's interested in carpentry to assist the professional carpentry team, and we've been able to sort of foster some relationships there and build up some of the local teens into truly invaluable folks, or they come up through the young company and then they become a front of house assistant or a box office, and their relationships then become like decades long. We actually have a former Rostern resident who moved to Rostern, then moved back here, who was in our young company and now is our front of house manager and my right-hand person. So we get to see those generations come through the organization. It's pretty beautiful.
Wonderful. I love those examples. Okay, Nicole, back to you. Can we talk about youth engagement in your organization, and is connectivity an issue with your programming?
So connectivity hasn't been really an issue. We're really lucky actually in Rostern. We're set up that way. I guess in a broader sense, a number of years ago, we made the big switch to having all our online ticketing and stuff, which at the time seemed like a risky move for us because it was just so different. But thank God we did that when we did. That has made a world of difference with the pandemic. If you had to do refunds or anything like that, it's just so much better. So it is a challenge with some of our older clientele sometimes, but it's been really good. During the pandemic, we did some virtual programming. We had concerts from the couch, just local musicians playing from their homes. We did studio visits. We called them studio sessions, when we'd kind of go attack an artist's studio and basically wander through their house and get a real fun peek at everything that they did. So that was kind of cool. I mean, our learning curve was pretty big with getting all of our technical stuff together. We only have a staff of 2. So if you want, you know, your equipment to work, you have to figure it out yourself. So that was challenging, but it was good. But then to get back to the youth programming, so for younger kids, we have a young artist program, which is a series of art classes that we have kind of in the dark months of winter. And they meet weekly for, you know, a 2-hour class. And we have a sort of a, not an art history portion, but we talk about a contemporary artist. They learn about techniques, and then we do a hands-on activity. And at the end, all the kids' work is curated and hung for a month-long exhibit. And that's great because they get to see their stuff in a proper setting, and they can bring family and friends to visit it. It's our best attended art opening. So that's always a lot of fun. We also have had a lot of youth engagement with community art projects. So we did a community portrait project 2 years ago, and we basically hired 10 artists to paint 3 paintings each in the course of 3 hours. So a portrait an hour. And the whole idea behind this was to give artists some work and some experience, but also to build relationships between artists and sitters, because they would visit for this entire hour. It was safe for the pandemic because there was distance between people. And it was just fun for town people to watch. We had it during outdoors, so during the farmers market, and it just gave a real festival atmosphere. And you know, where we live, we have 2 First Nations communities right close by, as well as Batoche National Historic Site and Fish Creek. So there's Métis communities, French, and Indigenous, various Indigenous communities. And a lot of these communities do their business in our town. And so to have people sit for this portrait project, it was such a wonderful way to have young people and old people working together. Some of our artists were really young, teenagers. Some of our artists were old. The sitters were also from children to elderly people. And it was just awesome. And then we collected all these portraits and we hung them at the local grocery store in the window for a number of months. And it was pretty incredible just to elevate everyone, you know, in that manner and bring that piece into the community was great. And so we also had a youth mentor that was working with us to organize that entire event. And so that was also a really great connection. And, you know, we've relied on her over the years to do different things. She also, that particular mentor is a Métis gal from Fish Creek. And she also helped us with, during the pandemic, we had a Connecting Communities page on our website where she was just sharing events that were happening in First Nations communities or with First Nations artists, Indigenous artists across Saskatchewan. And she was writing an article letting people know what was happening. And that was awesome because she gets out a lot more than we do. And, you know, so she was able to find a lot of really cool things that were going on. So that was a nice spin-off from that mentorship. And then, yeah, we have theater. Rachel was talking about a young company. We actually bring in those type of shows from Persephone Theater. It's Persephone Youth Tour. And we have 200 school kids watching these at a time. And those are always, they're great because it's young people acting, it's relevant themes, and then they have a Q&A at the end. And it's incredible how much these kids get out of these productions. So, and we do a similar thing with concerts as well. Invite the schools to come or bring the concerts to the schools.
Okay, these are great ideas. I think, Jessica, what we're going to do, and for our audience, Rachael, Nicole, if you don't mind, I'm going to put your contact information alongside the recording. Is that okay that folks can follow up with you?
Absolutely.
At a later date? I just think there's so many ideas floating around here that there's going to be some interest. So I'm going to pose one last question and then open it up to the audience for questions. So Nicole, do you see have you got any key opportunities or challenges that you're facing right now that you can share? Anything that's on your radar?
Yeah, I think a big challenge for us is it feels like our community is like on the cusp of I think becoming a lot more popular. There's a lot of projects that are happening. We're getting a new hospital going, things like that. And our challenge is to get people in off the highway as a destination. We used to do that with our play quite a bit, but we have a new challenge now. We have a lot of really neat businesses in town. And I think that more and more people are catching on to that. We just want to make sure we get that traffic that's heading to the Northern Lakes off of the main highway to stop and spend some time. And I don't know, we've been batting around ideas. We're part of the Chamber of Commerce, which is, we have a new Chamber of Commerce in town. And, you know, it would be great if a number of businesses could pool resources and, you know, whether it's a tour map of these are the 6 spots you have to do on your way to the lake, something like that. We feel like, you know, that could be really successful because there's excellent stuff going on and there's a really diverse community of business owners in town as well. Lots to see and do. And our town has a lot to offer. So we want to be a part of that. Accommodation is always a huge challenge. That's, you know, so anytime we get inquiries for wedding celebrations or larger conferences, that part's always a bit difficult. So down the road, we really hope to have, you know, more places available to stay, not only for artists, but also for the general public. Yeah, so I think the opportunities are huge, and we can get there. It's about working together, I think, with a lot of our other heritage sites that are nearby, partnering in that way, finding ways to combine events. You know, if we have a small music festival, I always look at Nanton, Alberta. I went there one time for a bluegrass festival, and I could not believe there's like 8 antique shops that are amazing. And, you know, then they also have a really good restaurant. And I'm like, this is a really smart way to do it because, you know, people will come for this small festival, but it's like a total destination. It's almost like you just need, you know, 5 good stops for the day that people are going to do to make it that a big success. I think Nanton is a really great example of how that can work. So that's kind of where we're looking moving forward.
Okay, thanks for sharing. Now, do you have a billboard that says espresso outside the community? I find that really works.
It's so funny that you bring that up because to my horror, I have been working on getting a new highway sign and that's just we just haven't gotten to it yet, but that's exactly what we were thinking because it's sort of like if someone sees fresh, delicious coffee or espresso, get in here, then they can see all of the art and the programs that we have. You just got to get that foot traffic in and then you're away to the races. People are coming to our tiny little ice cream shop in town. So this is doable. And so I'm working on that this month.
Okay. Yeah. Ice cream and latte. That's great. Yeah. Thanks so much, Nicole. So yeah. Rachel, do you have anything that you're working on in terms of addressing new opportunities or challenges as you move ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. This is our first so we, as I said, we built a permanent outdoor venue in 2021 in order to be able to continue to do theater. And so for the 2021, 2022, we were running solely outdoors. This year we have gone back outside while also being outside. So we grew in the pandemic, and have this year been, starting to figure out what does the cycle of that look like, and how do all of the pieces, we certainly know how we used to do it, how do we do it now? So it continues to be lots of opportunity to learn there. One of the challenges of that whole thing, which was also like going into the pandemic, was also a thing. We were looking at capacity building, and the staff that we do have, and they are at their limit of so what do we need, how do we add, how do we pay for it? And then I would say, certainly ourselves, but as an industry, we are at a time in history that on any given day can feel dire. How we do what we do and how we move forward, and it has completely changed, and is unlikely to go back to the way it was. But the rest of one of the daily challenges I find is, it feels like anyway, the outside society outside of our doors is moving on, or feels that we should move on and everything should be the way it was. So managing and balancing the expectations of the things outside of our doors on what we should be doing and how we should be contributing, and how we are or are not doing or contributing, when we are just trying to do the things we do and keep everybody healthy so the play can happen. So much in our industry is invested before you ever see something on stage. And so we're continuing to have to, COVID mitigate, and have COVID staffers and all of that kind of thing, and just trying to manage how everybody else and storytell what, try to help people to understand, and to meet them with, we're doing the best that we can. Yeah.
I think we can all relate to what you've just shared. I was reading an article this morning. I think they referred to it as a poly crisis. I'm not sure if I noted the term correctly, where it's all so seemingly overwhelming what's going on right now. It's just so big. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to turn over the Q&A portion to Jessica to see if there's any questions from our audience.
Does anyone have any questions that you want to type into the chat? We don't have any yet. We just have a comment. Lil Bean has great ice cream. I like how it is right beside the park. I agree. I also live in Rostern, and I know Nicole. And I'm just like, my brain always doesn't shut off. But even with both of your organizations, have you ever thought about maybe bringing a troupe to these busier areas, let's say Lil Bean, and you have like a bit of a live performance, right on the spot there, get some people engaged, especially people who aren't from the towns, kind of bring what you're offering to where the masses are, and try to, educate people so that they, are aware of who you are and what you're doing. That might work well. I know, like for Rostern, or anyways, just a thought of, sometimes it's like, go to where the people are and tell them about you.
Yeah, we definitely, we have seen that's a really great way to get people in the community just engaged in arts, without even knowing it. So I really like that Rachel was just talking about setting up a stage at the campground. We did a similar thing with an art gallery. We started a permanent, we called it our satellite gallery, in the main grocery store window. And everybody needs groceries, so everyone sees it. And we've had that as it's an extension gallery. So whatever we have on here at the station, we can put pieces in that gallery, or it can be an individual show. And it's a great way to get emerging artists that maybe don't have as much work to display some of their work. It's just a really versatile space. And it's amazing how many people stop and want to talk about the art that's in there. Not everyone is comfortable walking into a gallery specifically. So if you bring it to them, and then they can always find out more about the artist or come see us. We're just a few steps away. So yes, Jessica, I think that's always a great idea. We do sometimes work with other organizations to have music elsewhere as well. Sometimes it's challenging just because of the setup of different spots, but we do it definitely when we can.
Mm-hmm.
Hilariously, the beginning of what is now the harvest stage started in very early pandemic, as we were trying to figure out how to gather humans, and we initially landed on, let's get a flatbed truck, put a sea container on it, outfit it, and then drive it to the corner of Highway 4 and Marnock Line, and then invite the families from Marnock Line to come and see whatever it is we have. And then that sort of grew into, what if we then took it to the town of Godrich, or the various towns and things, like, as we were just sort of percolating on how to do what we do, but be near people. When we started talking about driving into different towns, then we got into what are the permits required, where are the bathrooms, what does each municipality require, and that quickly kind of landed us in we should look at something here. But certainly trying to think of where the people are. We also we do a lot of new play development at Blyth Festival. So sometimes playwrights come to us with an idea, or we have a story and we seek out a playwright. In fact, Blyth Festival commissions 25% of all Playwrights Guild of Canada new play commissions every year. And so that development process for each play varies depending on what the subject matter is and the content. We're regularly sending artists out into the community to collect stories, engage with the people involved. And certainly in the last 6 years, as we've been developing some work by Indigenous playwrights, if it's been content specific to a particular reserve or group of people, we've been forging relationships with those communities and sending artists in to embed and learn from and really be able to take on and honor those stories, which then also again forges the relationships, and we start to see for the opening of Ipperwash, we brought a bus of elders who came up to see their story on stage and see themselves and see other people hearing their story. So we do that kind of thing as well.
That's great. I have a question here from Jackie Wall. During COVID, there seemed to be a shift. For urban workers moving to rural. Have you seen that in your communities? Do you notice that there is more interest in the rural space from urban moving or even day tripping?
I do. I feel like I have seen that. I have even so within an artist community, it seems like a lot of artists are moving to rural communities just for affordability and to have the space that they need to do their work, particularly if their work doesn't rely on an audience that's close by necessarily at all times. So I feel like that is definitely a trend that's happening. There are also a lot of day trippers. People that want experiences that are outside of an urban atmosphere. They're coming out. It doesn't have to be, it's not fancy, but it's charming in its own way. It's peaceful. And it's about their personal relationships. It's about the people that you get to meet and connect with, that people love, and they'll keep coming back. So I think that's a really excellent thing to remember. People want to have a little day adventure. A lot of people are finding cash is tight these days, so you maybe can't go super far, but there's so much to discover that's close by.
Absolutely. The population, the demographic population in Blyth, Ontario has completely changed in the last 4 years. And certainly even our Main Street businesses, I would say over half, maybe 2/3 of them opened in the last 4 years. So this year, as we were reopening to a much larger volume of audiences, we had to stop and think, okay, most of the people on this street didn't live here before the pandemic, weren't operating a business. And while those who were born and bred here know what a summer on Queen Street looks like and all of the cars and what to expect, or they have memories of it, there's a lot of people in this town who don't have a lived memory of what it looks like when this place is taken over by 800 theater patrons a day. So we were trying to do a lot of educating and storytelling ahead of the summer season to try to help people to be prepared for what was going to walk through their doors, or just know, like, this thing that the bell is going to ring every day, twice a day in the afternoon. There is no fire. It is calling the people into the theater, all of these things that are just normal to us. But there's a lot of residents who are just like, what's happening now? They have lived here for 3 years and I've never experienced this. So yeah, absolutely, totally. And we've benefited in some fashion, even from, there are, retired, early retirement urbanites who've moved to Blyth, who now are, working in our box office, picking up a few, are interested in some casual work and that kind of thing. And, bringing their family and friends to town to experience the great things that are in their new location.
Wonderful. Jessica, if we don't have any other questions, maybe
We
we'll
do.
wrap. This was excellent, and I'm going to be pushing people to this video when we get it posted. Great examples of vibrant cultural organizations. I thank you so much for sharing, Rachel and Nicole. It's been it's just been really valuable. Again, to those folks who are joining us today, we'll have the video posted by early next week at the latest, with contact information on Rachel and Nicole. And our next webinar is coming up rapidly. I think it's next Tuesday morning, Jessica, at 10 a.m. And
Yes,
we're
it
talking
is. Mhm.
10 a.m. Okay, good. We're talking to colleagues in Manitoba next week about how they're doing economic development there. So thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Again, thanks again to our special guests. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.